And
Yay.
okay, thank you. Welcome everyone to our webinar, Making Voting Matter Again. Voting reform can save our elections. We are the Women, Money, and Democracy team at Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. You can learn about our activist sisterhood on our webpage. And we decided that we don't like the current voting system that we have right now. Right now, we have two options, and if you try to give any opinion aside from just which of the two options you like better, your voice doesn't really get heard, and we want to change that. You've probably heard of ranked choice voting. That's one way that this can be done, and we've also been exploring some other related options. Um, we invited some experts to talk about these systems. We have Ashley Houghton, the Chief Program Officer with Fair Vote, Sara Wolk, Executive Director with Equal Vote, and Eveline Dowling, the Senior Fellow and Research Analyst with Expand Democracy. And they will each be speaking to us about a different aspect of voting reform. After that, we will have a Q&A for if you want to ask more questions about, and so learn more about the things they're talking about, then that's the place to do it. I'm putting a link in the chat for submitting questions. I'll send it again closer to the Q&A portion. And then if it's not too busy, we could also use the chat for that. All right, so first we have Ashley Houghton with Fair Vote speaking about ranked choice voting.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I'm going to attempt to share my screen. I think it's going to work great. We're not going to have any tech problems today. Can everyone see?
Yes.
Yes.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And sorry about the tab up top. I blamed Chrome. So my name is Ashley. I wanted to say at the outset, I am admittedly a convert to democracy and elections. I spent a lot of time banging my head against the wall of various reforms that I cared about, and I just couldn't get things done. And I think the issues that I care deeply about now might be aligned with some of those of this organization. So I started my career working to end the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I cut my teeth working to limit the massive scale of the Pentagon budget. I moved to incredibly happy issues like Guantanamo and surveillance, and then the rise of anti-Muslim bigotry. And I believe, and it sounds like many of you also do in this cohort, that the only way to elect more just and peaceful candidates is to change the incentives that drive our elections. So I like to say I spent a lot of my career opposing the bad, and now I try to spend my time promoting the good so that I can get back to some of those issues and see substantive change on them. So why do we need a change? You heard a little bit of those from Heather. I know that this is a very text-dense slide, but there are so many problems with the way that our elections are run right now, both as candidates and as voters. So one, a lot of elections don't make it easy for the best candidate to rise to the top. You don't have a lot of choices as a voter, and as a candidate, you pretty typically have to move into a very specific box early in your campaign. Two is you are often forced to select the candidate you hate the least instead of the person that you like the most, depending on who you think is most electable. When you have a lot of people running for the same position, you end up with more non-majority winners. More people running should be good, but instead of having more choices, you can end up with a candidate who emerges with less overall support. So if you have 4 or 5 or 6 people running for the same seat, that means that someone can win with 70% of voters not liking them, right? They can win with 30 or even 25% of the vote and represent the entirety of that district. Number 4 is what I also brought me to this work. It also means that we're electing boxers and we're not electing legislators. I appreciate this community and this organization because peace cannot start with the winner. It needs to start with the candidate, right? So we need people who can govern and legislate and get things done. But our campaigns don't make that easy. If I want to win, it might be easier for me to convince Heather's fans or Evelyne's fans or Sarah's fans to stay home, right? Instead of trying to win their support on election day. It leads to this mudslinging effect, which gets us to polarization. So we are just not good as a nation at coming together and finding solutions. This also means that we have a lot of non-competitive elections. In a lot of the country, you don't have competitive elections in the general at all. 80% of Congress is decided in the primary, not the general election. And then when it comes to gerrymandering and redistricting, and I'm going to get into this, this gets even worse. So as my colleague Dave Daly says, you want a system where voters pick their politicians, not a system where politicians pick their voters. And, you know, fundamentally also for this organization, as with all problems, this means more harm for women. It means more harm for people of color. Women and people of color are told to wait their turn, not run yet, you can't run at the same time, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing is you're going to hear from a bunch of us about different reforms. And here is the big like overall takeaway. All of these reforms are better than what we have right now, right? So what is it? A lot of elections in this country are fundamentally not working. So why ranked choice voting? So I shared a pretty dire situation with you. It shouldn't be surprising. There are lots of tools to solve them, and I wanted to share them. Just as a quick show in the chat, can you share if you've heard of ranked choice voting before? Or also if you haven't, be brave. Amazing. Wonderful. Okay, so yes, also known as instant runoff. Yes, same thing. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to do a brief review, but this doesn't need to be like a substantive, like massive explainer. So the holy heck, oh my goodness change is in a ranked choice voting election, just like any other election, you can pick your favorite candidate, or if you want to, you can pick a backup or 2 or 3. And the idea is that someone needs majority support to win the election. It's not the silver bullet, but it is a key part of what might be needed to make our elections better. This is what a ranked choice ballot looks like. I saw that we have someone from New York City. You've probably seen this ballot. I have a sheepish admission. Back when I used to work on peace and security issues, I lived in Oakland, California, and I didn't know anything about ranked choice voting. And I went in and I used ranked choice voting and completely forgot about it after I did it. It is not a significant, you know, mind-blowing experience to go in and rank your candidates in order of preference. So as you know, you can pick your first, second, third, and so forth. So the question is, but how is it counted? Now you're officially entering what I call the ranked choice voting nerd territory. Not everyone needs to know all of this information, but I think that this is important for this particular group. So what happens? Let's say you have 4 people running for 1 seat. The person with the, we want someone to win with a majority, so the person who comes in last at the end of the first round is eliminated. And then anyone who supported them has their second choice counted for. And then by the end, Andy wins the election because he got enough second and third place choices to be able to win with a majority. People ask, how is ranked choice voting growing? And I will say I joined Fair Vote in March of 2020. I like to say I never learned how tall any of my colleagues were for the first year and a half of joining, because the day that I was supposed to join. But it has grown sevenfold since I joined in 2020. So it's in 48 cities, counties, and states, reaching 14 million voters. It's used statewide in Maine and Alaska. It's used in the largest cities in 6 states. 6 southern states also use ranked choice voting for their overseas and military voters. And what I find particularly compelling is this is really a local effort. This is something that can be driven at the city. The cities are really where this tends to gain traction. It's won 33 of the last 34 city ballot initiatives. This is kind of the classic. People like ranked choice voting. People say that it works for them. One of the questions that we get is, do people like it when they've used it? And what we've seen from survey data is that people find ranked choice voting to be an easy experience. When they relay difficulty, it's often because they aren't sure who to pick first, right? But it's consistently embraced and also has improved representation. Obviously, every city is different and every municipality, but this is where we've seen this gain traction. And yeah, what we've seen is that 75% of voters consistently rank the winner. It's making sure that people's voices are heard. It also improves the tone of campaigns. It's less mudslinging, more issues-based campaigns. So the idea is, how do we put power back into the hands of the voter? It's improving voter choice, making sure that we're solving this quote unquote vote splitting. It also allows more candidates from independent parties to be able to run without risk of being blamed a spoiler. If I'm running for office and I want to make sure that people support me, I'm going to try to win over other people's second choices, right? I'm going to say, consider me as a backup choice. So this is the ranked choice voting side of the conversation. There are things happening in the world right now that strike me as very compelling and important. And so I'm just going to briefly get into where these reforms can intersect with this, although I know that Eveline is also going to be talking about proportional representation. So this is considered like a bonus round. So on the left, we can see how gerrymandering harms representation, right? I'm sure that a lot of you have seen this kind of image before. And on the right, you can see what it looks like. I will add, with 2025 technology being what it is possible to make district maps that look completely square, but still really harm voters. So let's talk about proportional ranked choice voting, and you're going to hear about proportional representation in a minute. This is all of the usual ranked choice voting benefits, but this is when you have multiple offices that you're hoping to fill. And the idea is to make sure mathematically that those seats reflect the interests of the voters as accurately as possible. So proportional representation is an example of this. Let's say, take my district. My member of Congress is Jamie Raskin. Bless Jamie. He never needs to take my call. I can call in to compliment him. I can call him to say, hey, I wish you were focusing more on this issue. I can call him to criticize, but he's frankly going to win his seat pretty consistently every time. Under a system of proportional representation, you might see multiple members of Congress representing the same district where they have to work together across the aisle to affect change for your district, and also find other like-minded folks from across the country. So you would see more Democrats in Oklahoma have representation, and you would see Republicans in Boston get representation. So this is the idea of how might we mathematically solve some of these challenges. There is a bill, it's called the Fair Representation Act. And the reason it's compelling right now is because if you are watching the redistricting, the mid-cycle redistricting battle, and are wondering how do we solve this gerrymandering issue, proportional representation and proportional ranked choice voting would functionally make gerrymandering obsolete. It's the competition changes the way that you would even consider drawing these district lines, and it would be mathematically very difficult to do it in such a way that could infringe upon the rights of the voters there. So why now? On the left, we have the New York Times graphic on how redistricting is shifting right now. One way to solve gerrymandering is to make it obsolete. You could do that with proportional representation. And then on the right, I've heard there was a great headline that said, "Did ranked choice voting solve the male loneliness epidemic?" You saw an interesting campaign with Brad Lander and Sara Mamdani, but I don't want to focus on Mamdani at the moment. I want to focus on Brad Lander, right? This is a guy who probably would not have made a big blip in that primary race, but he and Sara Mamdani started coordinating in such a way that they could uplift each other because they were common candidates that didn't have to fight each other. Now, Brad Lander has announced his candidacy for the 2026 primary in New York's 10th congressional district. This is a guy who probably would not have gained as much traction within the Democratic Party had he just been squashed, as many candidates are in these fields, these competitive fields. But there was a beneficial engagement to be able to move this body of work forward. And then what's next? So why is this particularly important moving forward? So voting rights challenges for single winner districts. Sometimes, so as you all might be following, we're seeing a pending Calais decision and what impact this could have on voting rights. We need voting rights to be able to have a free and fair society for all American citizens. And this attack on voting rights could be really substantively harmful. Proportional representation and proportional ranked choice voting have been used as a solution in voting rights cases. So there are times where you just literally can't build a district or redraw district lines to ensure fair representation for the people who live there. And in those cases, proportional representation has been used. I know it's 2026. Y'all, 2028 is coming. We are going to see a very competitive, potentially primary, particularly for the Democratic nominee. Ranked choice voting was used in 4 states in 2020, and it was really a helpful way to ensure that every vote could be counted. Because let's say you really liked Pete Buttigieg, but you liked Elizabeth Warren second. If you voted by mail, in a couple of states, Pete Buttigieg dropped out before Election Day. So if you'd already sent in your ballot, having a backup was an important space. And so I know I'm at time. I just wanted to share, if you are interested in getting involved more substantively, I'm happy to share these slides afterwards. This is where we have state chapters. And as I mentioned, this is really something where it tends to be a body of work that grows at the most local level. So getting involved locally, particularly with city or statewide initiatives, is really valuable. With that, I will pause.
All right, thank you very much. Those are a lot of important things to think about and to get involved with, like you mentioned. It's good to know the problems with our democracy, and it's not hopeless. We have solutions. Next, we have Sara Wolk with Equal Vote. She's going to talk about star voting, a new system that builds on ranked choice voting, but hasn't been adopted anywhere yet.
Hi, everyone. Like Heather said, I'm Sara Wolk. I'm the executive director for the Equal Vote Coalition, and we're a national nonpartisan nonprofit. Um, I've been a longtime supporter and activist, volunteer originally on voting reform, actually started as a ranked choice voting supporter and volunteer. Um, and so this is a super important topic. I just want to start off by really appreciating everyone who's here for it, who's here to learn more, who's here to do a deep dive. Obviously, this is such an important issue, and getting it right really is the keystone to being effective on every other really important issue we care about. So I've got some slides for you. Um, one sec, right here. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, all right. So the Equal Vote Coalition is all about empowering voters. And empowering voters starts with ensuring that every vote counts equally. Our mission is to fight for true equality in the vote itself. So when we think about the right to vote, when we think about voter rights, we think about access to the vote in the first place. We think about things like gerrymandering. We think about money in politics. We think about the Electoral College, the Senate. There are a number of ways that our votes currently aren't equal. And all of those are important pieces of the puzzle. But if we want to be effective, this is kind of an order of operations problem. And it starts with the way we fill out our ballots and the way we vote ourselves. So there's a huge fundamental problem. Our current system works fine if there are only two candidates in the race. If there's two candidates only, you have a majority winner, you have a minority loser, it's a fair fight, nobody has to vote strategically, it's nice and clean and simple. But in competitive races, vote splitting can leave majority coalitions divided and conquered. Coalitions that have more candidates ironically have less power, and that's a huge problem. So in the graphic below, on the left, if it's just good versus evil, two-party system, Luke Skywalker wins handily. But the more friends he makes, the bigger his coalition is, the more competition we have in the election, the more likely the good guys are to be divided and conquered, especially if they don't all come together and strategically vote for the front runner on their side who they think can win. So, unfortunately, this happened in the very first election I ever voted in. Um, I was shocked, scandalized, and I was like, this is just broken math. And it really is. This is something that can easily be solved with a more expressive ballot that lets you show, hey, I prefer any of the good guys over the bad guys. So, traditional voting, plurality voting first, past the post, we tend to call it choose one only voting. And it really sets voters up for this conundrum where, I could vote for my favorite, but I don't think they could win. So I don't want to throw my vote away. Should I vote for a lesser evil to prevent an actual evil candidate from winning? So it's very coercive. It is manipulative. It sets people up to vote for, again, the front runner on their side who seems the most electable instead of voting for candidates that we really believe in and feel represented by. So it's a huge domino effect chain reaction. Vote splitting in the voting method itself leads to the spoiler effect, where a third party spoiler or an underdog candidate can throw the election to the other side. And to prevent that, we get strategic voting. Voters are like, what do I have to do to stop this? I'll do anything. They don't want to waste their votes. They want their votes to be as powerful as possible, even if that does mean, um, you know, a dissatisfying, depressing, disillusioning voting experience. And it's not just a voter problem. Parties have the same issue. In order to prevent vote splitting on their side, we see massive gatekeeping of who's allowed to run in the first place and putting thumbs on the scales. We see a ton of corruption. Um, and ultimately, because the system is only accurate with two candidates in the race, that leads to polarization, two-party domination. It magnifies the influence of money in politics massively. Obviously, we can't totally prevent money from being in politics. There will always be money, there will always be corruption. But the fact that voters are coerced in voting for the frontrunner who's raised the most money magnifies the influence exponentially. And we will never know the true impact until we get rid of this problem. So it obviously creates a big electability bias, as Ashley said, and disparities in representation. So this is the stuff that all of our presenters tonight totally agree on. We all agree on the problem. We all want to solve it. We're all here for it. So the question then comes to, how do we upgrade the ballot? What do we do? And there are a few different ways we can upgrade the ballot. The simplest is to just let voters show, hey, I prefer or I like all the candidates on my side. And that's kind of a simple thumbs up, thumbs down type of thing that you see in a system called approval voting. If we want to be more expressive than that, maybe actually this voter, Andre, Carmen, and David are all good guys, but who do I prefer to who? That brings us to a ranked ballot where I can actually show first choice, second choice, third choice, fourth choice, fifth choice. But a ranked ballot doesn't let us show how much or how little we like those options. So is Carmen almost as good as Andre? Or is Carmen a lesser evil who's almost as bad as Ella? If we upgrade even further to a 5-star or a scoring type ballot, we actually can see that nuance. So 5 stars for Andre. Looks like Carmen and David are actually both really good. 4 stars both. Blake is kind of the 1-star lesser evil, and Ella is the last choice in this case. Obviously not Ella Fitzgerald. Totally different Ella. So we recommend a system called star voting. With star voting, it's a 5-star ballot, and you score your candidates 5 stars best, 0 stars worst, just like a 5-star rating. So this is something that millions and millions of people do all the time. The instructions in a voting context are to, first off, give your favorite candidate 5 stars. So 5 stars for Andre. Give your last choice 0 or leave them blank. So we're filling in 0 for Blake. Equal scores are allowed. Okay, I like Carmen and David about equally. They're both really pretty good. And then score the other candidates as desired. What's cool about this is there's really no wrong way to do it. If I love my favorite and I hate everybody else, I can show that. If I really do kind of have a staged or a stepped order, I can go 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars, 1 star. If I like most everybody, but I really hate Blake, I can show that. So it's just a really natural way to express a more nuanced opinion, and that's why it is the gold standard for surveys, for polling, for gathering public opinion. And STAR stands for score, then automatic runoff. With STAR voting, you only have to vote once, and the ballots are counted in a 2-step process. First, we have a scoring round where the 2 highest scoring candidates overall are our finalists. Then we have an automatic runoff. Your full vote automatically goes to the finalist who you scored higher, and the finalist with the most votes wins. So in a lot of ways, it kind of works like a primary and then a top 2 general election all in one, but we're able to be more expressive so we don't have to vote again. Our ballots already show the information we need to find that majority preferred winner whenever possible. So to recap, in the scoring round, you add up all the stars and you find the 2 highest scoring candidates overall. Those are our top 2 frontrunner finalists. In this case, Carmen and Blake. And then you look at each voter's ballot and you say, which finalist did this voter prefer? This voter, their favorite wasn't able to win, but Carmen, their 4-star candidate, is clearly preferred over Blake. So this is counted as 1 vote for Carmen. And results end up being quite simple and familiar. The finalist with the most votes wins. Each voter's vote goes to 1 candidate, so it naturally plugs into election laws all over the country, and away you go. So star votings and voting methods in general have been studied really extensively, and the field and the methodology for studying them has come a long way as technology has evolved. This chart comes from something called voter satisfaction efficiency, which looks at realistic simulated elections to predict how often different methods elect the most representative winner. And as Ashley said in her presentation, the traditional plurality system down here is actually, if voters are honest, it's really horrifically, wildly inaccurate. And every single study using every single methodology reinforces these same relative conclusions. So in terms of accuracy, like, does the voting method elect the winner who best matches the will of the people? Our current system's the worst. The California system, where you add in a top 2 runoff, actually does a huge improvement, but we can do even better. Ranked choice tests a little bit better than that. And then approval voting, approval with the top 2 runoff, updated other ranked methods, and then star voting actually tops the charts. And that's with both voters who are being honest or voters who are taking into account viability, who are being strategic. So accuracy is just one thing, but it begs the question, what do we want in a voting method? At the Equal Vote Coalition, we have 5 pillars of what makes a voting method good enough for us to support. And we do support multiple methods. Star voting is our flagship, but we also support ranked robin and approval voting. So in essence, it should be simple. It should be easy to vote, easy to understand results, easy to tally, implement, and to audit the elections, obviously. It should be honest. Voters should be safe to vote their conscience. It should incentivize that good expressive voter behavior. And it should be expressive enough that voters are able to express their full opinion. That's the data we need in close elections to find the right winner. The tally, the way it's counted, needs to be accurate. So winners should reflect the will of the people as best as possible. And last but absolutely not least, it needs to be equal. Vote splitting literally mathematically makes your vote less powerful than somebody else's. So the system really shouldn't put some types of voters or candidates at an unfair advantage. And that's an easy bar that we can totally pass. In fact, it's the gold standard legal definition of 1 person, 1 vote. The weight and worth of every citizen's vote, as nearly as practicable, must be equal. And that's the Supreme Court. So what does that look like on the ground in practice? We need to prevent vote splitting. We need methods that are depolarizing, that don't have vote splitting, branch us off into one side versus the other. We need more competitive elections. We need more representative winners, and we need the system itself to be fair. So star voting was invented in 2014, and since its inception, the #1 FAQ question we get is, why not just go with RCV? The fact is that if RCV was good enough, star voting, approval voting, ranked robin, these other methods wouldn't exist. We want to be done with this. We're not here doing voting reform because it's super fun. We would love to be doing other things with our time, but we do owe it to voters to get this right. So with ranked choice, only the first choice rankings are counted, and the last choice candidates are eliminated in rounds. Your vote goes to the remaining candidate that you ranked highest, or if your vote's unable to transfer, it's discarded. So each round can eliminate candidates, but it also can eliminate voters if their vote's not able to transfer. And the election's over when a candidate has a majority of remaining votes. And that's not necessarily the same as voters who cast ballots in that election. Star voting was specifically invented to combine the best elements of previous proposals to deliver better results while addressing valid concerns with some of the older methods. So star voting at its core is a hybrid method. It uses a 5-star score ballot and then it adds in an instant runoff, i.e. like ranked choice runoff for that final top 2 runoff. And that's why it's called score then automatic runoff. So like any hybrid, it has that hybrid vigor where it's able to draw on the best elements of its predecessors while again addressing some of the concerns with older methods. And I do want to be fair here. Ranked choice has a lot of advantages, and we agree with Ashley and our other speaker tonight that it's more expressive. We like that it's more expressive. It does a good job of incentivizing candidates to be more collaborative. Winners in ranked choice do have support from more voters, typically giving them a stronger mandate to lead than traditional voting. It is more likely to get majority preferred winners. In fact, no voting method can guarantee a true majority. And it is safe to rank non-viable candidates, honestly, like a Ralph Nader. That candidate's going to get eliminated right off the top, and your vote's going to transfer, your vote's going to be counted and make a difference. But in ranked choice, it's not necessarily safe to rank your favorite first, just like in traditional choose one voting. So there are a few things that we think are deal breakers and why we actually don't support it over as a reform. First, there's high rates of voter error and voided ballots. Ranked choice has roughly 10 times the rates of voter error seen in other systems, and almost 5% or around 5% of voters actually mismark their ballots one way or another. Most rankings that voters put down are ignored. And this is something that we've actually run all the data on all the US elections using ranked choice voting to confirm. Most rankings that voters put down will never be counted. The candidate preferred over all others can be eliminated right off the top. So some of those rankings that are ignored might have been relevant. Because all the rankings aren't counted, ballots have to be centrally tabulated. They have to be centralized in one location before they can be tallied. And that violates election security best practices. We've been saying this for over a decade now, as have the election science community at large, but unfortunately now it's happened in the real world. Oakland, California and New York City, New York both mistallied their RCV elections, and worse, the mistakes went undetected. Human error happens. We need to be able to verify our elections. We can't undermine trust in our elections, especially not right now when our country is so divided and so up in arms. Those types of mistallies going uncaught and undetected is really completely unprecedented. I know that there's a lot of talk about, stop the steal and whatnot. I'm not talking about that. This is specifically according to the election bureaus. Both of the boards of elections admitted we did it wrong. Wow, sorry about that. And legal issues and bans is another thing. The biggest reason to just go with RCV is because it has such momentum. And in some ways that's true, but we see it as a stepping stone to a dead end. RCV is unconstitutional in most states for a variety of reasons, and it's been banned outright in 17 states. So our current system is really atrocious in so many ways. And we absolutely agree with everyone here that it needs to be changed. It needed to be changed yesterday, 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. Even the founding fathers knew that it wasn't great. But while solving or improving on some of the things that are wrong with choose one plurality voting, ranked choice voting can introduce some new, bigger issues in the process. So we can do better with star voting. It actually does eliminate the spoiler effect in vote splitting. It doesn't give an advantage to some candidates over others. It doesn't have voided ballot errors, very low rates. Wasted votes and exhausted ballots are prevented. Ballots can be tallied locally, just like the traditional system. It's all just addition, so it naturally complies with election laws all around the country. It's highly accurate. It's top the charts in every single study and model on election accuracy, no matter what methodology they use. And it does incentivize honestly supporting your favorite, which is really, getting back to the beginning, what we're here for. We don't want to have to vote lesser evil. We want to support the candidates that we want to support. We want free and fair elections. So we're calling on you all to be brave, to join us. Let's lead on this issue. You can learn a lot more on starvoting.org. That's the website about star voting. And then the Equal Vote Coalition website is equal.vote. Or equalvote.org also works. So we would love to have you. We're grassroots. We have chapters all over the country, volunteers all over the world, and we are making a huge difference. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sara. It's great to hear about different options to make sure we get it right first time. And to know what we're doing is going to make the difference we want. And like both of our speakers have said, any of these options are better than what we have now. All right, next we have Eveline Dowling, who will talk to us about proportional representation.
Okay, sounds good. I will finish us off. But first, I'm gonna try not to be a Luddite and figure out how to share this really quick. So bear with me for like 10 seconds.
Thank you.
Okay. Alrighty, friends. Do we see the big arrow?
Yes.
Yes.
Fabulous. Okay, well, I guess I'm finishing us off today. Thank you so much for having me on, Heather, and Women, Money, and Democracy. My name is Eveline Dowling. I'm a senior fellow at Expand Democracy, which is a nonprofit that seeks to catalyze action in support of promising pro-democracy ideas and strategies with a focus in the US, but we are working on expanding that abroad. And yeah, we want to connect these pro-democracy policies, initiatives, conversations with other, reformers, practitioners, scholars, and, not only bring to light new ideas, but also champion existing reforms. And one of those reforms that we champion through and through is proportional representation. So I'm excited to talk to you all about that today. Let's see. Oh, I'm using Canva for the first time, so there might be some fun transitions. Okay, so let's get into it. So why proportional representation and why now? Well, this gets at the core of what PR is trying to solve. And I think that this has already been alluded to beautifully by our first two presenters, but in these winner-take-all elections, it's very common, right, for these sizable groups of voters to end up with no representation at all. Even when they make up, say, 30, 40, 45, 49% of the electorate, right? Not a majority. And gerrymandering reform helps, such as like independent redistricting commissions, but even perfectly fair maps still leave a lot of people structurally shut out because the system itself is winner take all. So over time, there can be whole communities that become locked out of representation simply because of how the rules translate votes into seats. So over time, we call this a permanent, we call these people permanent minorities or communities that can vote, they can organize, they can turn out, but still rarely see anyone they support win office, which is not what we're looking for in a representative democracy. So reformers, right, we care about this because representation gaps are beyond feelings of unfairness, right? It's not just I feel left out. There's consistent literature and research that shows that undermining by not being represented, it undermines public trust in the electorate, legitimacy in democratic institutions. And when large number of voters consistently feel like they're losing, they disengage, which is exactly the opposite of what a democracy is all about. So PR, proportional representation, is about fixing that at a system level. And it's not just about drawing better lines, but making sure votes actually translate into representation. Oh, so sorry. Okay, so what is PR, proportional representation? I'm going to probably be calling it PR for the rest of this chat with you guys today. But PR is really, it's about the outcome of an election. So it's not a single method. So the idea is seats are allocated roughly into the proportion of the vote share that they get. So if a group wins about 30% of a vote, it should end up with about 30% of the seats in the legislature. It's that easy, right? It's helpful to also clear up, though, what PR is not. Some people think PR is just party list systems, or it's incompatible with nonpartisan elections, or it's, only about redistricting. It's about a lot more than that, right? It's a goal. It's a desired outcome, right? We want fair proportional outcomes. And there are many ways of getting there, which I'll go through 3 of the big ones, right? But proportional representation is the goal. The method that you can get there is via, 3 different forms. You have party lists, you have mixed member systems, and you have candidate center systems like STV. So that PR is the goal. And right now we're going to talk about the method. How do we get there? How do we get those 30% of the votes into 30% of the seats? One way of doing that is this thing called list PR, right? So this is one method for achieving that goal. Party list voting is most common form of PR worldwide. It's used actually across most European democracies and in places like South Africa. And I think more than 80 countries use a variation of the system to elect their parliament. It's based on pre-registered political parties, with each party being allocated a certain number of seats, roughly proportional to the share of the vote. So voters cast a vote for a party, and each party wins seats in proportion to its share of the vote. So if a party wins about 40% of the vote in a 5-seat district, right, it's going to get about 2 of those 5 seats. And there are 2 main versions of this party list PR. There are closed list systems, and there are open list systems. The closed list system, parties decide the order of candidates ahead of time, and seats go to candidates in that order. So, right, you only have 1 vote. You have to vote for your party. You cannot vote for the candidate themselves individually. In an open list, right, it's in fact that you can, right, you have 1 vote, but your vote counts for both your candidate and your party. So you have an ability to differentiate candidate from just party alone. And a big upside is that party list systems translate votes into seats much more accurately than winner take all by wasting fewer votes. It gives smaller parties, a fair shot, reducing the role of gerrymandering, all these things. And, countries with party list PR also tend to have lots of parties themselves, as the list systems are highly proportionate. So that means that, coalitions are often the norm, and with a lower barrier to entry, new parties can start and be successful if larger parties do not understand or respond to current pressing issues that a government is facing. So second method to get to the goal is something called single transferable vote, which is also called choice voting. And it's a candidate-centered form of PR. So voters don't just choose one person, they rank candidates in order of preference in multiple member districts. This looks kind of familiar to what our past two presenters were discussing. However, it's a little different. So several candidates are elected at once, and there's a minimum number of votes needed to win a seat. If a candidate gets more votes than they need, those extra votes are transferred to the voters' next choices. This sounds a lot like RCV. If a candidate can't win, their votes are also transferred. This continues until all the seats are filled. STV, it's used in Ireland, Australia, historically in several US cities. And reformers like STV because it produces these proportional outcomes while keeping elections very candidate focused. And it works in nonpartisan races and gives voters very meaningful choices. But the difference between an STV/choice voting and RCV is that RCV elects one winner by ranking candidates, while STV uses ranked ballots to elect multiple winners proportionally. So that's the key. And our last one, this is MMP. This is mixed member proportional voting, sometimes called the German system. And it combines actually local winner-take-all elections with PR. So voters typically get 2 votes. They can vote for their local district representative, and they can vote for a political party. And so about half the legislature is elected from these single member districts, just like how elections work in the US today. And the other half comes from party lists, which we talked about already. That was method 1. So those list seats are used to top up, so to speak, each party, so that the overall makeup of the legislature matches the party vote share as closely as possible. So, for instance, if a party wins 40% of the vote, it should end up with 40% of the seats overall, even if it won more or fewer district races. And supporters kind of, people who really love MMP, they say it's the best of both worlds kind of compromise. You keep local representation and geographic ties, but you also get the fairness and diversity of proportional outcomes. So yeah, places like Germany, New Zealand, they utilize MMP to balance those goals. So all in all, here are the 3 methods that we talked about to get to our goal. We have our party list PR, our MMP, our single transferable vote, STV, and all 3 are they're aiming to produce these proportional results. The key differences are whether voters are choosing parties, people, or both, and how closely each system, I'll talk about it in a minute, fits the US's political and legal context. But I wanted to also note here, there are semi-proportional methods that exist. I will not be getting into those. I will allude to them later on, but things like, cumulative voting, These are, there are forms of semi-proportional representation, still cool, because as we said, it's better than what we have now. But I feel like these 3 are kind of the gold standard if we're really trying to aim for PR in its full entirety. So how PR, how does this fit with RCV and STAR that we just talked about, So RCV and STAR are solving one problem, which is how votes are counted, It's about reducing vote splitting, making it easier for people to vote sincerely and earnestly to their own preference ordering. We love that. PR, though, it's kind of tackling a different problem that's adjacent, though, how the seats are allocated. So it determines whether groups of voters actually translate into representation. And the reason reformers often pair these ideas together is because they're complementary in nature. RCV can be used to run proportional elections in multi-member districts, and PR can improve representation outcomes even without changing how ballots are marked. So these reforms don't compete with each other, they stack. You can fix vote counting and representation at the same time. So what are the problems that PR solves? I have alluded to a lot of these already, but in essence, PR, it dramatically reduces in terms of representation, this number of wasted votes, votes that don't help elect anyone, so to speak, that are thrown away in first past the post elections. Many voters actually see somebody that they support win office. That means that more viewpoints are represented. Voters have more ability to choose what kind of voices and perspectives they want in an elected body. Over time, the legislatures look more like the communities they represent, and reduces a sharp, in-group, out-group, affective, polarized dynamic that we're seeing largely in the US today. For competition, right? There's fewer safe seats, more competitive elections. We love this. We want seats to be competitive, right? We want them to be allocated proportionally, and parties and candidates can't rely on permanent majorities. This is a good thing. We want that in our democratic systems. And it also, right, as I said, it encourages this coalition building, right? Groups have to work together to pass or block changes, which is great and helps reduce zero-sum politics, which we know all too well in the United States. In addition, I've touched on this already as well, right? In terms of polarization and legitimacy, PR changes the incentives inside these legislatures, right? Because no single group can usually dominate on its own. Governing requires this coalition building. Small groups have a seat at the table. And over time, legislatures start to reflect the real diversity of communities, which helps people feel that their government actually looks like them. And that in turn really strengthens legitimacy and trust. And so, yeah, PR helps break the stranglehold of the two-party dominion, which is something that we are plagued with. And also on a civil rights note, PR creates more durable pathways, right, to minority representation without relying on racial gerrymanders. Because seats are allocated proportionally, representation doesn't hinge on drawing lines around community of color. So PR can substantially mitigate the effects of gerrymandering while still protecting minority power, which is so cool. I wanted to really, I don't know if I'll skip this. I feel like I've kind of said this, but a common misconception is that PR is basically just another version of gerrymandering reform. And it helps, but right, I want to make it clear that even with perfectly fair neutral maps, single member winner-take-all districts still will produce distorted outcomes, right? There are big gaps between votes and seats, and you still get one party dominance in many places, right? PR changes the structure of the representation itself. So it makes the outcome less dependent on how the district lines are drawn, and it allows voters to share views to win a seat if they're spread across a city or region instead of neatly packed into one district. So gerrymandering reform fixes unfair lines, PR fixes unfair outcomes. They're complementary again, but PR kind of goes one step further. This sounds like a pretty good deal. How does the US implement this? How do we get something like this into the US? Well, there are a few pathways, some of which are, have been hiked down more often and routinely than others, but I'll just go through a quick 3. This one is the most practical and near-term pathway for PR in the US. It's cities using their charters to adopt multi-member districts. So instead of electing one person per district, cities elect several representatives at once, with seats allocating using either fully proportional methods like PRCV and multi-member districts, or semi-proportional methods like cumulative or limited voting or whatever. The key legal point is that authority varies state by state. So many home rule cities can change their election systems locally, while others need state approval or a charter amendment. So it depends. Places like Cambridge, Mass. Has been using multi-member districts with RCV since 1941. In Peoria, Illinois, has been used cumulative voting in local elections for a while. And in Texas, they also use cumulative voting for its school board as a Voting Rights Act remedy. So this pathway is real and legally viable in many places. It's just dependent on state and local law. In addition, right, another pathway is about how PR-like systems have already entered the US law through like the VRA, the Voting Rights Act cases, and similar state laws. When courts find that winner-take-all elections dilute minority voting power, they sometimes approve semi-proportional systems as remedies, right? These aren't full PR systems, as I said before, but they move away from the winner take all, which is better than nothing, and give minority communities a more durable chance to elect candidates of choice. So we've seen this in places like Port Chester, New York, and Alabama. They adopted cumulative voting. In a number of North Carolina municipalities, they use limited voting. Both are semi-proportional representation. And reformers care about this pathway because these systems are legally validated by the courts, and they're less dependent on drawing these districts, which can make them more durable over time. So it's cool. It's another alternative using, that's been used as real world civil rights remedies in the US. And our last one is this third pathway is about what the states can do, right? So beyond these maps, I know I've been talking a lot about these maps, but I think it's important to mention and note states have real leverage over how representation works, and they can permit or require multi-member districts, authorize alternative voting systems, and they can even set broader representation standards for local and state elections. So we've seen this before. We've seen it in Illinois. They use multi-member districts for its House for over a century. California's VRA opened the door to alternative remedies beyond single-member districts. And there are actually states like California, Colorado, Mass, Minnesota, where I'm coming from, that give cities flexibility through charter laws to adopt different election systems. So the big key takeaway is that PR can be a legislative reform, and it doesn't have to come through just ballot initiatives. State law can create the legal permission and structure that makes these local and court-based pathways possible in the first place. So all in all, I'll close with this. What actually changes when we look at an ecosystem that has adopted PR? Well, for voters, PR creates a more meaningful choice, less pressure to vote strategically. You don't have to choose the lesser of the two evils. Your vote is more likely to elect somebody you actually support and represents your thoughts, ideas, and opinions. For candidates, the barrier to entry, it's lower. You don't have to be the single dominant contender in a district to have a real shot, have all the money. Governing becomes more about coalition building than just winner take all. And for communities, representation starts to look more like the people who live there, both descriptively and ideologically. So fewer groups are locked out of elections. This means that permanent minority subgroup that I discussed at the beginning, it declines. We're seeing people in office that represent their communities. So the big picture, is that PR, it's not just election mechanics. It's changes about who runs, who wins, and who feels represented. So it was so lovely to chat with you all today. If you have questions, please reach out at team@expandemocracy.org. We have a website where you can learn more about all the other amazing reforms that we champion. We have a Substack with our newsletter and lots of other fun things on there. We've also got a podcast where we have talked about PR extensively. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eveline. I really like knowing that we can learn different things about, or we can have different ways of representing everyone in the district, so it's not just based on the majority. Right, now we're going to move into our Q&A portion. Again, we have links to submit questions in the chat. And so if you're wondering about something that our speakers talked about, please feel free to ask. First, I'm going to say that Women, Money, and Democracy is working on voting reform this year. And if you want to get involved, you can talk to us. You can also volunteer with one of the organizations that our speakers are with, or you can just tell people about voting reform, some interesting things about it that you think sound exciting. And people hearing more about it will do a lot when it shows up on the ballot or we're voting on it and it comes to a question. Okay, and so yeah, if you want to ask a question in the Q&A portion, please go to the link I sent and we will begin. This is not going to be a debate. It is for informative purposes. Okay. So our first question is, what should we do about the Electoral College and how votes are weighed in different states differently?
Heather, are you, I don't know, aiming that question at any specific presenter? I feel like it applies to maybe all of us.
Yeah, anyone who wants to answer.
Yeah, go for it, Sara.
Just speak.
The first election that I ever voted in was 2000. So there was George Bush, there was Ralph Nader, and there was Al Gore. And as probably everyone here knows, that election was spoiled. The third party with just a couple percent of the vote was just enough that the Democrat didn't win, even though the coalition together, the left, had more votes in that election. Those of us who were paying attention a little earlier or who have studied up will also remember Ross Perot, where the same thing happened in reverse in, I think, 1994. And so vote splitting, the spoiler effect, the issue that both ranked choice and star voting and proportional representation are designed to address at its core, that is the problem that we can solve. The Electoral College itself adds another layer, but every time the Electoral College has been to blame, just vote splitting on its face has also been the culprit. So one of these things is like legally viable and totally changeable, and the other one requires like a constitutional amendment. So there are actually some really cool things, like Maine and Nebraska already don't do it the winner take all way. So electors, if they have 10 electors and 60% goes one way, 40 goes the other, for example, then those electors would be split 60-40. And if all the states did that, it would make a huge difference, even without getting rid of the Electoral College. And there's a group, Equal Citizens, that's actually doing by like two states with the same number of electors can be like, hey, I'll do it if you do it. And so they can both do it without because it's kind of like an arms race. Like one side doesn't want to disarm if the other is gonna double down, just like gerrymandering. So a lot of these other electoral reform issues are really hard to solve. There are ways forward, but I really see the voting method itself as the first step to being able to be more effective on those other issues.
Thank you. Does anyone any of the other panelists want to add to that?
The only addition, and this is so nerdy, but Sara, exactly what you were talking about. There's been a similar concept that I literally just learned about called the Potomac Compact that was considered for a while as a way to solve the gerrymandering debates. So Eveline knows because she's very probably tuned into the Potomac Compact, but as someone whose background was not in structural reform policy, and it was the idea that two states, Virginia and Maryland, back when Virginia was considered a solidly red state, would disarm their gerrymandering at the same time. So there's been a lot of interest in revisiting that concept this year.
Yeah,
Right, perfect.
interstate
Thank you.
compacts are really important for those like states' rights issues.
All right, next question. Does one form of these voting systems work better with proportional representation than others?
I don't know. I mean, there is like, right, Ashley discussed PRCV. So that's something that we know, off the top of our heads is something that is definitely viable. Whether or not, I don't know about STAR. Sarah, do you know, has STAR been used in tandem with PR?
It has, yeah. So there's
Fabulous.
proportional star voting. It's really actually very similar to proportional ranked choice voting in the
Yeah.
way that it works in terms of the algorithm. You can do star voting party list, you can do MMP, you can do candidate centered proportional, and the other methods we support, same. Approval voting is one of the ones that actually has a long history of being used for proportional elections, and since it is so simple with the ballot, that's a great option to look into. And what we find is that the kind of pros and cons of the single winner methods, when we compare them, tend to hold when we extrapolate to proportional, but a little bit mitigated because if you have multiple winners, the like even if the different methods would elect the people in a different order, they'll often still elect the same group of winners. So it's a little more forgiving,
Yeah.
but also a little more complex. So yeah, we really have a great page on that. I posted it in the Slack or in the chat.
And I would just say,
Thank you.
proportional representation is gold standard of representation, right? We can all agree that like plurality winner elections not working for anyone, more representation better, particularly for women and people of color who are historically knocked out of our democracy. And then certainly on the RCV side, it has been used, the single transferable vote and proportional form of ranked choice voting is currently used as a Voting Rights Act remedy in several states.
All right, perfect. Thank you. And why did Illinois end having multiple member districts in 1980? And what do you think of that change?
Yeah. Why? I mean, so I think they ended in I think it was, yeah, so it was over a century. Let me go back to my slides. And it ended, yeah, so it was from 1870 to 1980. Multi-member districts were for the state house. And from what I understand, I'm right now double checking because off the top of my head that's a little bit new. That's some niche information, but it seems that it discontinued largely because of the political and administrative pressures. So like it was party leaders and incumbents. They essentially, it was difficult to manage and sometimes threatening to the established party balance, and gradual reforms replaced it with more conventional single member district system. I can link my source to the chat, but it is kind of sad because they were doing so well. And so, alas.
And here's the other thing about proportional representation systems. It makes nearly every election competitive, right? So by design, if you're an incumbent, you might be a little skittish, right? And so it does require some intestinal fortitude to maintain and keep those systems, even though we know that it's better for society.
Okay, Sarah.
Well, so again, we totally support proportional representation. I do want to throw in that there is a conversation about like, is it always the right choice for a given jurisdiction? I think most of us would agree it's the right choice for certain types of elections. But the trade-off is like if you're guaranteeing proportional representation of like ideological factions, that comes at the cost of guaranteeing geographic proportionate representation. So with single member districts, every voter is guaranteed equal representation in terms of like they have a representative and they can go to that representative. Whereas so you can't guarantee both. You either get geographical proportionate representation or you get ideological proportional representation.
Gonna build on that too. It's so here's the other thing. Proportional representation is a concept that has not gotten a lot of attention until very recently. And I will say there are a number of organizations that are going all in on this space. And a lot of them think that proportional representation is the only way to move things forward. And I think Sara and I are both in the similar spot here where like we should still have mayors, right? We should probably still have governors. And so the concept of having single winner elections is still vitally important and fundamental.
Yeah, and one more interesting nerdy thing. When we talk about like the electoral college and winner take all, traditionally that's meant like the winner in a state gets all that state's electors. So that's like geographical proportionate representation. It's totally not the same as winner take all as you were using it in your presentation. And so that's just, unfortunately, in voting reform, we have like conflated terms and it's all wonky and it is a little hard to detangle it all.
All right. And then we also have a question. Do you see prospects for pilots to use these voting systems? For example, since I am new to these systems and I have not used them in political elections, what about the idea of local communities having panels that run experiments with each system?
We love it. Do a rank the blank. We call them rank the blanks in the ranked choice voting space. But you know, there are any local group across the country that does ranked choice voting will often have some event at a brewery or you know, another local space, and people rank their favorite whatever. I will say after 2024 election results, I'm not speaking on behalf of Fair Vote, but as Ashley, I was having a tough time. And so it was right before Thanksgiving, and I invited as many people as I knew to come to my house and rank their favorite Thanksgiving side dishes. And I made the 3 side dishes. And you will all be thrilled to know that green bean casserole won out, and that's what we brought to Thanksgiving. Tragically, the sweet potatoes were awful. And I blame my lack of seasoning. So, you know, sometimes you just don't show up in the way that you want to. But we had about 32 people, and it was a great opportunity, great event.
Yeah, I think sort of on that note, whether or not these states can pilot these experiments and such things, I feel like, I don't know, state priorities, state governments, their priorities are elsewhere as we sit in this current political moment. But I think it does actually point to the importance of civic education and the role of schools and making sure that this is in curriculums from, you know, a young age through high school, you know, into college. These are things that another realm at Expand Democracy that we champion is making sure that, you know, just knowledge of these alternative voting systems, how they work, doing them in practice is something that isn't totally foreign to, I call them, like, some of them are kids, teenagers, but when you're 18, you can vote. And, you know, that there are some groups that are trying to lower that age. So it's important that we get that knowledge out to people. That's all.
That's a great idea. Are there any schools that have voting reform in their curriculum?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, I point to a specific school district. I could point to the one that I grew up in Iowa City, Iowa, ICCSD. We indeed had to learn about in our government class. It wasn't alternative voting systems, but we did have to learn about just like world. I guess they're alternative because it was like global politics. So I think it varies vastly depending on the school district, the state, et cetera. But I know it exists, and I know that push for it. There is a definite push for it. So
that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Hey, Sara.
It's really been a renaissance in academia around voting method reform in the last decade, in the last couple of decades. Um, the way that it used to be studied was very binary. It was axiomatic, and that was kind of the best they could do. But with like the dawn of computer simulations and engineering and modeling, all of these advances in technology have created huge windfalls for the voting reform and electoral science space. So a lot of curriculum is still a little outdated, but just in the last like 5 years, there's mountains of new peer review out there on ranked choice voting, on real world case studies. FairVote finally released the full data bank of all of the ranked choice voting elections in the US that have been had. We didn't have that until 2022. So if you go to equal.vote under slash case underscore studies, we have a huge we have like you can visualize real world elections and see how they actually played out. There's just a mountain of information that wasn't available a couple of years ago.
Those
Yeah,
sound like
and
some great resources.
for sure. And
Sorry,
I was going to
continue.
say my background is actually academic. So I'm a scholar in regarding ranked choice voting and alternative voting methods. And so I can confirm it is I don't know, sexy. Is that the word I want to use to describe this field right now? But it has been gaining a lot of attention. There's a lot of great dialogue that's happening. Some of it a little some of it a little more contentious than you'd expect, but it means that people are excited about it. It means that people are engaged with it. And yeah, we are. I mean, I've got like multiple working papers right now, but if you go on our Expand Democracy website, you can see what I've published in that domain. And it's great to see. Yeah, my little academic heart beats very happily to know that this is something that is gaining traction in the US.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Another question is how much can we hope that these systems will stick around once we get them adopted?
Yes. It is much harder to get rid of these reforms once you have them. So as Sara noted, there's been an effort to ban ranked choice voting in several states. And it's succeeded primarily in places where they don't have it. Where we see ranked choice voting, and I'm sure other systems, once people use these systems, they like them. They don't want to change them. And so that's a good news for all of our reforms. I think when you look at the power of the ballot and bringing things to the ballot, that is a structural reform that often isn't talked about, but is also vitally important because many of these reforms are not won legislatively. They are won by voters taking this to the ballot itself. And so as long as we have access to those kinds of direct initiatives, and as long as people get access to these reforms, they're more likely to keep them.
Yeah, totally. I think that the systems, they tend to stick when voters experience the clear benefits, right? And the reforms, it's not just about like legal permission a lot of the time. The durability depends on political support. So that, for example, the reason why Illinois, their house, they stopped using MMP for over 100 years was because of political reasons. It wasn't because it was unconstitutional. So, right, there is rollback. However, there's also, they can be so durable. I look at, Cambridge, Massachusetts, over 80 years, they've been using multi-member RCV. So I think when the voters, they see the benefits, the administrators can run them smoothly, I think that they become very embedded into the charters or statutes or legislatures.
That is great to hear. Sarah, do you have a comment?
Yeah, 2024 was a rough year for voting reform in general. We saw a lot of campaigns lose and a lot of hard work totally squandered. Um, like I said, ranked choice voting was banned in 17 states, but two of those bans actually took down approval voting as well, which is another voting reform that we do support, even though approval voting doesn't have the things that like the reason for the ban were all things that are true of ranked choice, but that aren't true of approval. But of course, lay voters often conflate just all voting reform is the same. So what we are seeing is that like if we fail to address people's valid concerns, it undermines the future of voting reform in general. For us in Oregon, our last campaign, we lost the ballot initiative by just 99 votes, and mailers were sent to every single house that said, "Don't fall for this ranked choice voting scheme." And then it listed 10 bullet points that were all things about ranked choice voting that aren't true of star voting. But obviously, voters couldn't tell the difference. They didn't have time to do that research. And ranked choice was on the ballot statewide. So both failed. In Eugene, there was a massive disinformation campaign that was actually funded by a longtime fair vote lobbyist. And Ashley, we talked about this before it happened. I was trying to head it off at the pass. I was like, it doesn't have to be this way. This is a lose-lose. We've got to stop it. But that was out of state dark money, outspent the little local Eugene campaign 3-1. And the mailers that were sent there posed as coming from like status quo advocates, but they were actually sent by ranked choice voting organizations. So we really need to do better. I think my one takeaway is I really wish it wasn't this ugly, but it's not factually incorrect. It's all in the public record. We have Orstar public
I don't
campaign
want this to
finance
be a debate,
reporting.
so let's put that off the discussion. But thank you for those contributions. Okay, next question we have. In Massachusetts, our municipalities can choose the way they want to set up their voting system, often ranked choice voting, but they have to ask permission of the Commonwealth and legislators, and can wait 2+ years before getting an answer. We are now trying to pass a law that would give local options for ranked choice voting in municipalities. Let's see. So
Local options bills are a great way of moving this forward. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Sorry, you can continue.
Oh no, just raising up the value of a local options bill. So in spaces where you don't have the option to bring something to the ballot and you need to move legislatively, trying to pass a local options bill just to be able to say if a city wants to enact it, they can. Giving it an option to go to the voters is another way of getting these reforms moved forward. It's terrific.
Yeah, and talk about sort of that piloting and experimentation, right? I think that local option bills are cool because they let the cities experiment with democracy without having to wait for the whole state to agree. So, if it's, available, then yeah, give those communities permission to try voting systems on their own instead of, having to wait for a statewide consensus. So that's great. We love Mass. Mass is doing great work out there. So cool.
Yes, it is fantastic. All right, and then in most cities and states, who or what entity makes the decision about changing voting systems?
Voters.
Voters. I'll say it louder.
Woo!
All of you, assuming that you are not a part of legislatures, you may be. but all of you actually have to say, and even though it feels like a lot of the time, oh no, I'm disenfranchised, I'm disenchanted with the system, you wield more power than you know.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Do we have any questions that people would like to say out loud? We're coming to the end of the questions on the form. Eileen.
Hi, thank you for the excellent presentations. I've learned a lot, and everything was clear, except I want to be sure about something. With the STAR method, is that mainly one ballot? It seems like there was one situation that was explained that there may be a need for a second vote. I'm for just going in once and having it all done because it takes people out of work. They need money, and it costs more money for municipalities to set up and all the booths and voting systems.
Yeah, so star voting is just a one-time vote. Voters only need to vote once. It's counted in 2 rounds, so that's an automatic runoff. So we generally recommend that star voting be done in the general election, especially for local elections. And for jurisdictions that need a primary, you can do a star voting primary, advance the top 5 candidates to the general, and then do a star voting general election. But in smaller jurisdictions that don't have, too many candidates running, they have the opposite problem of not enough candidates running. You can absolutely just skip that primary.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have other questions?
I did post this in the forum, but it didn't quite get asked, so I'll say it in here. In relation to education on this, I know it was a little bit addressed, but specifically, are any of your organizations working with state boards of education that determine the standards that teacher education programs in public universities or colleges that certify future teachers to incorporate education, at least 5th grade through 12th grade on alternative approaches to education, and then specifically working with teacher ed programs, because, getting this to get traction over the next decade or two will really be enhanced if you actually are getting 5th grade to 12th grade teachers having to incorporate it and then being helped to incorporate it. So are your organizations doing that work? And I hope so. And if not, I would really encourage it.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever we get the chance.
So we've spoken to a few school board organizations, but they're mostly focused right now on trying to make sure that school boards are elected in a more equitable and representative way. When it comes to the body of political science, there's also interest in understandable neutrality. While we are, as 501c3 organization with a 501c4 sister organization, people know that we like ranked choice voting, and so if I'm going to reach out to a professor or a high school teacher, there are certainly lots of people who support these reforms who come at it from a more neutral space. But when I talk to a professor, they pretty much always know where I'm coming from.
Totally. At Expand Democracy, as I said before, we care about a lot of different reforms. And I want to say most state civic standards today don't specifically require students to learn about alternative voting systems like RCV, PR, STAR, etc. But the structure of civic education with state standards and local curriculum control that does allow for these topics to be incorporated. So some education leaders and civic partners like iCivics, Center for Civic Education. I don't know if these are groups that sound familiar. They are often key in integrating alternative methods into classrooms even before like formal state standards change. So iCivics is a group we work with at Expand Democracy, which would maybe be cool to check out.
Perfect. Thank you. Stacy, you have a question?
Yes, I missed the first 30 minutes, so if you answered this already, it's okay. You don't have to. I can listen to the recording. My question is the concern about money in politics, PACs, dark money. Can you hypothesize, or do you see any evidence for diminishing that? Because as we know, with the state, the unlikelihood of getting states, although Public Citizens done a good job of getting states to say they'll vote against it. And there are other efforts. It seems like money is, the big thing. Is there evidence that you can help reduce that with any of your voting systems?
That's a great question. There's another person that we've been working with. His name is Tom Moore. He is actually trying to overturn Citizens United and actually get dark money out of politics. A whole different, I know, clap. He's doing the Lord's work. But specifically, like, do these alternative methods of voting compared to first past the post, winner take all, do they do something explicitly to combat dark money? I'm not sure if I'm just off the top of my head seeing a clear mechanism. There might be some incentives to not use dark money, but I'm not seeing a direct link, just as I think about it right now. But there might be one.
I'll add, so money in politics is a huge problem. It's a really complex thing to try and solve. It's very much like whack-a-mole, where as you button down one area, new loopholes pop up, and then if you make it really complex, you end up making it harder for little guys to navigate the super complex reporting thing where the big nefarious players have no issue. But we have really strong partners in the voting get money out of politics space as part of the Equal Vote Coalition, and that's something we're really proud of. And then short of getting big money out of politics, better voting methods in general, especially ones that eliminate vote splitting completely, have the power to mitigate the influence of that money in politics. A lot of people vote for the front runner on their side who seems the most electable because you have to do that under a coercive voting method. But with a more accurate, empowering voting method, you can say, money be damned, I'm going to vote for the little guy. And it may actually be that these candidates who we think are electable are not actually the ones that are popular. It's just kind of a feedback loop.
The only thing that I would add to that very eloquent approach is these reforms go together with money in politics, solving money in politics like peanut butter and chocolate, right? Because the common denominator is they are popular. People want their votes to matter more. They want money in politics to matter less. So we've seen reforms shared together as a big package piece of a bill. It's part of how ranked choice voting was introduced in Alaska, for example. It was included across a dark money provision as well. And so it was the idea of how do we put voters first? And when you think about what puts voters first, it's all sorts of reforms. It's whatever makes your vote easier to cast and as impactful as possible without the undue influence of money in politics.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, I think maybe it's getting on time to wrap up. We really appreciate the speakers tonight, and we want to thank everyone who participated in this webinar. It was sponsored by the Women, Money, and Democracy team at WILF US. Women, Money, and Democracy works on economic justice issues, educating our members and advocating for projects and equitable solutions that create a fairer economy and a fairer version of democracy. Our main projects include public banking, monetary reform, feminist economic literacy, limiting corporate power as a threat to our democracy, and corporate money. And in this particular election year, we're focusing on ranked choice voting and other alternative voting systems as a way to break the stranglehold of the two-party system and create a more accountable and responsive representative government for we the people. Women, Money, and Democracy meets every third Tuesday of the month. And it's at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Mountain, and 4 p.m. Pacific. If you'd like to join us, I'm going to put the contact email in the chat. You can become part of our committee, or you can just sign up to work on this particular issue. Either way, we'd love to have you. Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, WILF, has been working for international goals of peace and an end to war, human rights, women's rights, nuclear abolition, environmental justice, and economic justice since our founding in 1915 by Jane Addams and other international women who knew that we can go farther when we go together to create a world that works for everyone. Coincidentally, February is new member recruitment month at WILF, and I'm going to put a link in the chat in case you're interested in joining us. Again, thank you for everybody who came tonight. It's really great to have you here.
Thank you, Mary Beth, and thank you to all our speakers. It's great to learn about this important issue. And again, if you want to get involved, you can reach out to Women, Money, and Democracy or advocate for voting reform around your own groups or other organizations near you. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you for facilitating, Heather. Great job, everybody. Thank you.
Night.
Thank you.
Thanks for organizing,
you.
Heather, and thanks, Mary Beth, Ashley, everyone. Eveline, great to meet you.
Thank you.
Good
Feel
night,
free to reach
everybody.
out with questions and look forward to seeing you all out there on the volunteer scene.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Have a good weekend.